Hey everyone, it's Finn here, Nolan Nerdcast here with the review for Dosa Divas. Um, right off the bat, two things I really enjoyed about this. One, I love Outerloop's games. I really have enjoyed all their offerings from Falcon Age to Thirsty Suitors and now Dosa Divas. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I came in here with some expectations because it was just one of those studios, right? That like they just make games that I enjoy, and so I was excited to try another one. And this one seems to be kind of following up on Thirsty Suitors in the sense of it being an RPG, but the RPG mechanics that they mostly borrow from, I think if you are familiar with RPGs in general, especially indie ones, Mario RPG from the Super Nintendo, and a little bit of a Octopath Traveler, which I'll get into. But that's neither here nor there. The basic crux of Dosa Divas is it's a cooking based RPG centered around the fact that cooking meals for those that we love can be a very powerful mechanic in forging relationships with other people. And I'm pretty sure all of us, regardless of your affinity to cooking, has a story or a memory tied to food that has been prepared by someone else, whether it's a parent or a family member or a friend or a loved one, spouse, significant other, whatever. And that's kind of what the story beats of this game are. It's about two sisters trying to reconcile with a third sister, their parents, their friends from their past. Things have happened, but it all comes down to the power of cooking, the power of food, the power of friendship, all comes together to win the day. And it's nice. I mean, this is a short RPG by all metrics. It's about 10 to 12 hours to 100%. I think I got my platinum right around that time frame, and that was with meandering a bunch. But you don't need a multi-dozen hour epic to get a fun story or a fun time out of an RPG. And this is the story of Amani and Samara, and they're trying to stop. Well, I don't want to get too much story spoilers. Suffice to say, it starts with them on a road trip, and then they come into contact with their third sister that they've become estranged with, who has become corporate and is trying to outlaw the act of cooking and instead replace it with like corporate food paste in a tube. And they all grew up in a restaurant with their parents, so part of the story is figuring out why this third sister Lena has done such a thing and has become the bad guy. All of the conflicts that you come across in all the areas are born from the fact that while you were gone, this sister has kind of gone rogue, gone evil, so to speak. And we're told through flashbacks and various other mechanics about what happened. I won't get into that. The story's cute. It's charming. I don't think it's going to be winning any awards for best RPG story, but I liked the characters. They were silly. They had fun characteristics and personalities. I think the game would have benefited a little more from giving them more fleshed out, mechanics or just moments. Everything kind of seemed, I don't want to say this in the derogatory, but like, the Marvel movie thing where nothing can actually be serious. There's got to be a joke or something silly at every moment to undercut the tension. It felt like that sometimes, which is cool. That usually is what I like. So it worked out. One thing that I thought was really weird story-wise is you're joined by this mech that's basically a transformer of a food truck, right? Named Goddess. Goddess is the reason that you can go into this like cooking zone and create the meals for everybody, and because that's the other part of this game is the very strong cooking mechanics on top of the RPG battles. And then you meet other robots that are related to Goddess, and that was never really explained or told or fleshed out, and I thought that was a missed opportunity. I found that was one of the more interesting mysteries, and they just kind of it's just something you're just supposed to accept. Like, hey, yeah, there's sentient robots that all came from their restaurant, and now they pilot each other. I don't know. But going back to the RPG part, so I'm going to talk about the RPG part, and then I'm going to talk about the cooking part, and that'll pretty much wrap it up. So the RPG part, I mentioned Octopath and I mentioned Super Mario RPG. Octopath because you can have a boost mechanic where you can expend boost points to make your attacks and your abilities stronger. And also from Octopath, they have like the weakness system where instead of it being weak to elements like fire or water, they're weak to tastes. So savory, salty, spicy, stuff like that. And when you quote unquote break an enemy by hitting them with enough of their weak points, then instead of breaking, they're called being stuffed, and they're shown visibly as like having too much food. It's a cute visual mechanic to it. And then when it comes to the Mario RPG, it does one of the things that a lot of indie RPGs love to do, and I've loved since the Super Nintendo era, which is the time a button press before you get attacked and you'll get an additional defense boost. Time a button press before you attack them and you'll get an additional damage boost. It's such a simple mechanic, but it lends itself to paying attention to the enemy animations, and there are some fun animations in this game. I think battle-wise, it's not a necessarily difficult game unless you're really bad at timing button presses, but I did find the enemy variety was a little lacking. Every area, and there's only 4 areas, had like 2 to 3 enemy types. So even by the end of the game, you're looking at maybe 15 enemies total. And then the attacks that you have were all very limited, I guess. So all 3 of your characters, Goddess, Amani, and Samara, have 3 different types of attacks. They can have a charge up special attack, they can have a button mash special attack, or they can have one that's kind of like the ping pong, like time the button press to knock the item back at the enemy, and it gets faster and faster until you miss. So they all have the same types of attacks, which also kind of made it feel a little less expansive as it could have. I thought that they could have had each character have different types of special attacks, but again, that's a nitpick. The combat is snappy, it's fast paced, and it's satisfying, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like, no fights feel like a slog. But they also require you to pay attention, whether it's for the button presses or making sure that you're attacking with the right elements, because otherwise you're not going to break their guard, and then the fight will take a lot longer. And then each boss fight in the game has a really cool mechanic that's unique to them that just kind of elevates them into a more memorable experience. The cooking mechanic, I feel, is ironically a little undercooked. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Because the ingredients is just running around the map and getting items until they grow back after a couple minutes. Trading some of those ingredients to a vendor to get more specialized ingredients. And then going into a cooking mini game where each thing you try and cook has 2 mini games attached to it. And then your rank on each mini game determines how much of the item you cook. So most of the mini games were totally fine. I had no issue with them, but there was one, and I'm just gonna dock a imaginary point in my head for it. There's the one where you have to spin the joystick at a certain pace, but it never seemed to work. I was either going too slow, too fast, and they wanted you to like maintain it into a sweet spot. I was never able to get that one go, and I understand that's more of a skill issue on my part than theirs. But every other mini game, I immediately got a hold of. But that one, until the very end of the game, eluded me. I was never able to get a good score on that. It was frustrating. And then as you progress in the game and you start doing more difficult meals, they start adding 2 different difficulty modifiers to the mini games. One I found perfectly acceptable. One was some bullshit. So the first difficulty modifier is they'll throw like little splotches, I guess, on the screen that move and obfuscate your vision of where you're trying to button press, but you can manipulate them by pressing other buttons on the shoulder pad. And so that was fine. It added a wrinkle, but it wasn't unfair. The other one completely blacks out the things you have to button press. And so you either have to have looked immediately and know where the timing is, That one I felt was never fairly implemented. But again, skill issue, I guess. As a whole, the experience was so fast paced and brisk that I never found myself getting bored or, run down with the limited amount of attacks or enemies, because the game kind of kept clipping away and you get invested in the story and the cooking. Again, I wish that the characters you were cooking for had more substance, because 5 minutes later they're hungry again and there's no benefit except increasing like the village meter that appreciates you for unlocking awards. But for the most part, like unless it's for the quest, there's no real purpose to cooking above and beyond. And I felt like for a game that's quite literally based around the power of cooking, I thought they could have made it feel a little more personalized. But all in all, I really enjoyed my time with it. Dosa Divas was a very enjoyable romp. The RPG mechanics were solid. The story was enjoyable. The cooking was good, not great, which I thought it would have been the other way around, right? Like the cooking would have been the highlight. But again, what are you going to do? But all in all, give this a solid 8 out of 10. Like it's just, if you're looking for a bite-sized, see what I did there? RPG experience, you can do worse. And I think you should owe it to yourself in the year of our Lord 2026 or later, depending on when you're listening to this, to try Dosa Divas. It's just a fun experience and I think you'd really enjoy it. Yeah, that pretty much is me. So Finn signing out. Dosa Divas review. Go team.